Identify the asymptotes for each of the following functions. Part A. Vertical asymptote we can do first. To do this, you set the denominator equal to 0. So we set 2 minus x equal to 0. If you add x to both sides of the equation, we get x equals 2. So there's our vertical asymptote. If we look at horizontal asymptote, for this we look at the degrees. I see that these are both the same degree. Numerator and denominator are both degree 1. So our horizontal asymptote is of the form y equals the ratio of the leading coefficients. So in this case, the leading coefficient in the numerator is positive 1. In the denominator is negative 1. So we divide these and we get y equals negative 1. Now there's a horizontal asymptote, so that means there is no slant asymptote. Part B. Vertical asymptote first, we set the denominator equal to 0. So we've got 1 plus 2x equals 0. We can subtract 1 from both sides of the equation to get 2x equals negative 1. Then divide both sides by 2 to get x equals negative 1/2. Now that we've isolated x, we know our vertical asymptote is x equals negative 1/2. For the horizontal asymptote, these numerator and denominator both have the same degree. They're both degree 1. So our horizontal is of the form y equals the ratio of the leading coefficients. So negative 5 for the numerator, positive 2 for the denominator, so we have negative 5 over 2. Because this function has a horizontal asymptote, it does not have a slant asymptote. Part C. Vertical asymptote comes from setting the denominator equal to 0. So we set x minus 2 squared equal to 0. This happens when x minus 2 is equal to 0. We add 2 to both sides of the equation and get x equals 2. So that's our vertical asymptote. If we look at horizontal asymptote, we get this by looking at the degrees. For this, it might help to expand out the denominator. So this looks like 4 over. If we square the bottom, we've got x squared minus 4x plus 4. So the degree of the numerator is 0. There are no x's here. The degree of the denominator is 2. So this fraction is bottom heavy. The degree of the denominator is bigger than the top. So our horizontal asymptote is y equals 0. Part D. Vertical asymptote we get by setting the denominator equal to 0. So we set x plus 1 equal to 0 and then solve for x. We subtract 1 from both sides of the equation and we get x equals negative 1. So there's our vertical asymptote. For the horizontal asymptote, I see that the degree of the numerator is bigger than the degree of the denominator. This means there is no horizontal asymptote. But we have a chance for a slant asymptote. So to get the slant asymptote, we would do long division and then discard the remainder. So we can write out this division as x plus 1 into 2x squared, and I'm going to leave placeholders 0x plus 0. Now for our long division process, remember we divide, then multiply, then subtract. So we divide the leading terms first. 2x squared divided by x is 2x. Then we multiply. 2x times the entire divisor. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 1 is 2x. The multiplication is done. Next we subtract. So 2x squared subtract 2x squared is 0. So these cancel out. 0 subtract 2x is negative 2x. 0 subtract nothing is 0. Subtraction is done. We go back and divide again. So negative 2x divided by x is negative 2. The division is done. Next we multiply. Negative 2 times x plus 1 is negative 2x minus 2. The multiplication is done. Next up we subtract. So negative 2x subtract negative 2x cancels out. 0 subtract negative 2 is positive 2. So we have a remainder of 2, but we only care about the slant asymptote, so this remainder is negligible. We just care about our quotient. So our slant asymptote is the equation y equals 2x minus 2.